Welcome into the Tech Ed Podcast. I am your host, Matt Kirkner. What if we could pack amazing leadership, bouncing back from disappointment, the sport of boxing, all of that into one episode of the Tech Ed Podcast? We are going to do that today. Somebody who's become just a wonderful friend of mine, doing amazing things. He is an absolute servant leader. He embodies what servant leadership is all about. He has just an incredible background, where he started, how he ended up in the boardroom, as he puts it. But from some very impressive and humble beginnings comes Héctor Colón, who is the guest this week on the Tech Ed Podcast. He is the president and CEO of Lutheran Social Services. Don't let that whole title scare you away. We're going to cover all kinds of different topics, including the great things that are happening at LSS. But for starters, Héctor, such a pleasure to have you here in the studio, and thanks for taking some time.
Thank you so much, Matt. I'm so happy to be here, and thank you for your friendship and all you do for LSS. Appreciate you so much.
Well, the work that you're doing is so important, and you're changing lives in so many ways. Our audience knows that here at the podcast, we are all about securing the American dream for the next generation of STEM and workforce talent. That can take a lot of different forms in what you're doing for the next generation, and for that matter, the current generation of people of all ages here in the state of Wisconsin, in Upper Michigan. We're going to talk all about that today on this episode of the podcast. But before we get into that, let's dispel maybe anybody who's saying, wait a minute, I'm not a Lutheran, I'm not a Christian, or this isn't my thing, and is ready to skip on to some whatever they listen to when they're not listening to the Tech Ed Podcast. Why should they stick around for this episode?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm not Lutheran. In fact, I'm the first non-Lutheran, non-pastor, non-Norwegian to run LSS in 145 years. And so we accept people from all backgrounds, all races, all ethnicities, all genders. No problem with that. I also say that because we get about 85% of our revenue from government resources, so that we can't Lutheranize or Christianize
Sure.
anybody from that perspective. But what we can do is live out our values, live out what Jesus taught us on how to love your neighbor, how to serve your neighbor, and how to have compassion and those kinds of things. So we do that through our behaviors, through our actions, and that's how we live out our mission and vision.
So up until this point, if you had to be Lutheran and you had to be a Norwegian in order to run the organization, I would have qualified on both.
All right.
Because I am both a Norwegian and I attend Lutheran church. I'm a member of a Lutheran church.
Yeah.
But to the point of the episode, we're going to talk about all kinds of stuff, right? We're going to talk about the amazing things of the lives you're changing at LSS. We're also going to talk about, as we suggested in the intro, bouncing back from disappointment, your career in boxing, which is such a really, really cool background. But one of the things that inspired me, Héctor, is just your background. You grew up here, south side of Milwaukee, and you have quite a history here. Talk about your beginnings here, and how did you get started here in the city of Milwaukee?
Yeah, I remember grew up in the near south side of Milwaukee, 21st and Lapham. Both of my parents came from Puerto Rico, got married here, and my sister and I were born here. She's 5 years older than I. One big event I think I had early in my life is when my mother and father got a divorce when I was 12 years old. And when that happened, my father moved to Puerto Rico.
Okay.
And he was just gone. No money, no calls, just completely gone. And I remember at the age of 12, starting a paper route.
Wow.
And I was helping my mom pay the bills. I certainly was, like buying my own clothes and those kinds of things. But I learned business very early, how to canvas and get more customers, how to make sure that I was providing good customer service because I could lose people, and, learn to get up early, work ethic. So it was an incredible experience at a very young age. And during that time, it was kind of tough. My mom has a 7th grade education, had to work 2 and sometimes 3 jobs.
Wow.
She wasn't always around. And my sister, I was 12, she was 17. She was addicted to drugs and had co-occurring mental illness. And we didn't fully understand what the mental illness was at the time. And it was just felt like a lot of chaos. And so that
was a
was
lot of pressure to put on a young man, 12-year-old kid. Wow.
Yeah.
So Sentinel route, Journal route? What was it at
It
that
was
time?
Journal Sentinel.
Oh yeah, so it was
Both
after they combined. Okay,
Yep.
yeah. So you get this opportunity to be an enterprising young man to
Yeah.
understand the value of. I love the word canvassing. I remember my friends that had paper routes growing up. Canvassing was sales, right? I mean, that
Right.
was when you were going out and you knew who was on your route and who got the paper, but you also know who didn't, and that was your opportunity to go out and get people interested in the newspaper. So credit to you, by the way, for of course for taking that role, for helping to support your family. Sorry to hear about the challenges that that your sister went through. I'm sure a lot of that probably it certainly shapes the person you are today, and is part of the why of the things we'll get into in just a little bit at LSS. Before we do that, I mentioned in the intro boxing, right? So we got to work that in, and this isn't just like some little hobby you had for a couple of years when you were a teenager. We'll get into kind of where you ended up as a national boxing champion and so on. But start out with what got you interested in boxing as this young man growing up in the city of Milwaukee.
Yeah. So in my neighborhood at the time, there was this individual that really didn't want me to be there. And one day I went to play baseball with him and some of the other kids, and he came up to me and he called me a spick,
Oh,
the N
geez.
word, and then hit me in my face. So I came home with a bloody nose, was crying. And as soon as I got into my house, my father was on top of the stairwell and he said, ¿Qué te pasó? What happened? And I explained to him what happened. And he told me that he wanted to take me to the boxing gym so that I can learn how to defend myself.
Okay.
Because he said, you have to hit him back next time.
Interesting. Yeah.
And so he takes me to the boxing gym, and I was intimidated. I really didn't want to be there.
Right.
All these big guys pounding on heavy bag,
How
and
old are you at this point?
9 years
9 years
old.
old. Okay. Yeah.
And I wanted to play baseball. That's what I liked. But my father played baseball. He was my baseball coach, and that's what I was more interested in. But he introduced me to my coach, whose name is Israel Acosta.
Okay.
They call him Shorty.
Okay.
He's a giant in my life, and he's a giant in this community. And right away, he put me in front of the mirror and started showing me some boxing combinations. And I remember him telling my father, "Your son is a natural. He's going to become a champion." And so here I am, wounded self-esteem, and this guy just believes in me immediately. And so one lesson there is words can have a powerful impact on you.
Absolutely.
And certainly Shorty's words at that moment when I was 9 years old changed my life.
So where's this gym?
United Community Center,
Okay. Sure.
9th and Washington.
Yep.
And it used to be called The Spot back in those days, long time ago. It's really grown over the years. And the boxing gym has had a national reputation as one of the best. And so that's where I trained.
Wow. So you're 9 years old and you go in and you're in front of this mirror, and Israel Acosta, is that his name? Yeah, it
Yes.
shows you that, basically the words matter, says this young man can be a champion. And in fact, not to fast forward too deep into your life, but you end up as a member of the USA boxing team. Bridge that gap a little bit from how do you go from the 9-year-old kid in
Yeah.
front of the mirror to somebody that's literally on the USA boxing team.
Yeah. So I remember losing my first two fights and wanting to give up. And I didn't feel like it was fun. There's this intense fear you feel before getting into the ring.
I would think, yeah.
And then I lost and felt humiliated. And I remember my coach telling me, "Don't give up, champ. You have natural ability. You're going to become a champ." And I remember him saying that with, again, this intense belief in me. In the third fight, I beat the guy that beat me the second time, and I ended up becoming a 7-time national champion, competed all over the world with the United States national boxing team. And it was an honor to travel the world representing the U.S. We would have the USA gear. I remember getting that USA bag with the shoes, with the gear and the shirts.
How old were you at that point?
On the U.S. team, I started when I was 14.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah, and my first international trip was in Canada, but I've been to Ireland and Scotland and Poland and Russia and Germany and all over the Caribbean, all over the United States, traveling and representing the United States of America. And it was a huge honor to do that. and a responsibility, to represent our country well.
Sure.
And so I learned just so much through that experience, and I am so grateful.
But so share some of those. That had to be an incredible learning experience, and if you could probably, and they're in your book too. I'm sure we'll talk about that. But if you could make a list of some of the things that you learned, or some of those areas where these are some key takeaways from that period in my life. What are some of the big lessons that you learned?
Yeah, five virtues that are in my book,
Okay.
My Journey from Boxing Ring to Boardroom, Five Essential Virtues for Life and Leadership. I think the virtues of courage, which is really about facing your fears. I don't care who you are, Mike Tyson, Evander Holyfield, or Héctor Colón. You're going into that ring with a little bit of fear that you might lose, fear that you might even die. And so that's the danger of the sport, but it's the dedication, the determination, and the discipline that gives you the confidence to get into that ring and really overcome those fears. The other virtue I say I learned a lot is the virtue of humility, specifically the way the ancient philosophers talked about it, which is not thinking less of yourself, but more of others. I saw that in my coach, Shorty, where he would be there 7 o'clock at night. Sometimes after my baseball practice, I'm the last one there and he's waiting to train me, or he's sacrificing his weekends, his vacations so he can go to my fight. So I learned that virtue of humility I would equate to servant leadership through my coach Shorty. Then I think about temperance. Temperance is about self-control and restraint. And when you're boxing, you have a strategy and you're in there, you have that strategy, but sometimes your strategy is not working, or sometimes you might get hit and you can't just get mad and retaliate and go wild. You have to stay composed and calm and go through your head. How do I make sure that that doesn't happen again? So that virtue of temperance, you learn in that ring. And then magnanimity. Magnanimity is the virtue of striving for greatness.
Okay.
And working really hard to achieve that. And in the sport of boxing, that's what you do. If you're not champion, you're number 2, number 3. That's never good enough. You have to strive to be the champ. But then you put the rigor and the training behind it in order to become that champ. And the last virtue is perseverance. And that's about, one, being willing to fail so that you could reach your full potential. And then when you do fail or lose, like in a boxing, you bounce back and you come back even stronger and try to win the next time.
Those are all great. I mean, fantastic, fantastic virtues. You talk about courage. We just did our podcast a couple weeks ago on the occasion of the 250th birthday of the United States of America, and we talked about there's two speeches, but one was Ronald Reagan's speech at Pointe du Hoc in 1984. The other one was John F. Kennedy at Rice University in 1962, the famous go to the moon speech. And both of them talk about the importance of courage. It's interesting, here 2 weeks later, and I highlighted that specifically in that podcast, but as an American value, right? As something that's really kind of created the fabric of our nation. Interesting, you had mentioned that first, the suggestion about temperance, and I've watched boxing my whole life. I don't know it well. I mean, I understand the concepts, but certainly remember back to the even the days of Muhammad Ali and Leon Spinks and the you mentioned Evander Holyfield and Mike Tyson.
Yeah.
And the idea of temperance, because I think a lot of times you see the perception is that it's just finally somebody who their trigger got tripped to the point where they just went crazy and like just a barrage of punches and landed a bunch of them, and it almost looks like can look like uncontrolled rage. And what you're telling me is that it's exactly the opposite. Am I understanding that right?
It's a science. And so you got to be very calculated and it's very strategic and make sure your game plan is effectively executed. And if you fall short in any way, you got to be careful. So the one guy that I think was really brilliant at this is Floyd Mayweather.
Okay,
A lot of people don't give him enough credit because maybe he dodged fights or he waited until people were out of their prime. But in my opinion, I can honestly say that nobody has been able to pivot like Floyd Mayweather has in fights. There are times where he was being beat. Shane Mosley, Oscar De La Hoya, Manny Pacquiao, and then he just strategically and brilliantly pivots and wins the fight.
Hmm.
Yeah, it was amazing. I don't think I've ever seen anybody like that.
Yeah, temperance that's a great word. I love that. I'm going to use
Yeah.
that. I'm going to use that one a little bit more often. That's beautiful. And then you talk about perseverance, and it's a good segue into a question that I wanted to get to that I just remember talking about at length when you and I had launched that first time, and the idea that things don't always go your way. And even though your goal is to be a champ, your goal is to be number one, and you had tremendous success in the sport of boxing, but some disappointment too, right? So talk a little bit about that disappointment.
Yeah, for me, losing, I was in the Olympic trials and I was favored to go at 147 pounds, and I was 19 years old. And as a 19-year-old kid, I was distracted. I was not focused, mind, body, and spirit. And for the most important opportunity in my life, I got into the ring and I lost. And I was absolutely devastated because I wasn't going to win that gold. I wasn't going to go to Barcelona, Spain,
Right.
and win that gold medal for my coach Shorty, which I wanted to do so bad. And I wasn't hearing from the promoters about that multi-million-dollar contract so I can lift my mom and my family and my friends out of poverty. And I was just absolutely devastated. And I ended up finding God. I went to Holy Hill on December 27, 1992.
And Holy Hill, I know well, but tell our audience what Holy Hill is. It's an amazing, magical place. Go ahead.
It's a beautiful place, and it's if you want to pray, or they have a gift shop there, you can buy books and things like that. So I went there and I bought my first Bible and I just started reading it, and my life changed. I gave my life to Christ, and I felt this love, this peace, this joy that I didn't find in the world. And then 8 months later, that guy that robbed me of my Olympic dreams, we fight again. It was on cable television, and it was in Colorado Springs. And I ended up knocking him out in the first round
Wow.
of the for the U.S. Championship. And then the promoters came back and wanted to talk, but before that, I felt so empty. I felt so empty. I felt like I lost, and now there's nobody around, and I was confused. I didn't know what I wanted to do. But then at the same time, I was really inspired by what I was learning and Jesus and the love I felt. And so then I knocked the guy out, and the tension came back to me. And I was 20 years old at that time. And I put it through a year of prayer and discernment and just ended up feeling a strong calling away from the sport. It was the hardest decision I ever made in my life because something I worked so hard for was literally at the tip of my finger and I just gave it up. There are guys like I beat some of the great like Vernon Forrest. He was a four-time world champion and I beat him twice. In fact, I beat him at 139, yeah, twice.
At the weight, that's your weight?
Yeah, when I was fighting at 139, and then the next year came along, a next tournament, and I couldn't make weight because I didn't start training enough. So that's when I moved up to 147.
Got it.
And he ended up making the Olympics at 49, and he beat me the third time.
Okay.
When he beat me the third time, that's when I took a little layoff, a little bit too long,
Okay.
and then I gained weight. But I beat him twice, four-time world champion. I knocked out Jose Antonio Rivera, who became a three-time world champion.
Wow.
I fought, on the team with Oscar De La Hoya. We traveled the world together. So it was an incredible experience.
Amazing.
But I just ended up feeling a strong calling away from the sport. And it was really hard in the
Right.
beginning because something I worked so hard for was literally at the tip of my finger. I'm likely would have been a world champion, likely would have been very successful like some of these other individuals. But I made the right decision.
Sure. So tell me a couple of things. For our audience's benefit, you talked about Holy Hill. It's one of my favorite places in the state of Wisconsin. It's this beautiful monastery at the top of a hill. You can see it for miles and miles and miles. It looks almost out of place, right? I mean, it looks like something you would see in Germany or somewhere in Europe. And you go up this winding road. There's the stations at the cross you can do, or you can drive up to the monastery. What prompted you to go there when you went?
Yeah, so when I was probably around 18, I was in Colorado Springs and I started reading the Bible there,
Okay.
and I felt this joy, this peace. But then I just got distracted, didn't stick with my faith. And honestly, that little voice came where, hey, be the world champion, all that comes along with it, the money, the fame, do that. And then later on, find your faith, as a young 18-year-old kid is
Right.
kind of what was in my mind. And so, but I always felt that I wanted to go back to that. And unfortunately, it took for a big loss and a big upset for me to feel empty and kind of without purpose. And then that's when I went to Holy Hill.
So obviously, there's a huge message of spirituality and faith that came out of that. Bouncing back from adversity. What other lessons did you learn through that on the perseverance side?
Yeah, just really about not giving up. So here, Jesse Brasino was the guy. He beat me, and I came back even stronger. But this time, I was focused, mind, body, and spirit. Where the first time I wasn't. I was distracted. I was thinking already of the gold medal and already of the millions and the fame and what was coming. Oh, I was going to be pro and I was going to be this and that, and that was later. I needed to focus what was in front of me right now. And I'll tell you that that was a very important lesson, to be very focused, mind, body, and spirit at each and every opportunity of my life, whether it be a job, whether it be education, or marriage.
Right.
You got to be all in.
Absolutely.
You can't just be halfway
Yeah.
if you want something great.
Very inspiring as always from Hector. So I
Yeah.
absolutely love that. Still involved with the boxing world?
Yeah, so I'm part of USA Boxing as a board member, and I've been the vice president there for it's been over 5 years, no, 7 years actually, and it's a great way to give back. So USA Boxing traveled me all over the world. I had such great experiences. I remember getting that bag with all the gear and just feeling like, oh my gosh, that bag,
Right.
and I was so poor and now I got the brand new Nikes and the
Yep.
shirts, and they'd give us per diem, and we'd go on tours and visit these beautiful places and met the president of Poland and Moscow, Red Square, and just all these beautiful places. So I feel very thankful
Mm-hmm.
for the champion they brought out in me, and really all those virtues that helped me propel from the boxing ring to boardroom. And it's a way of giving back.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you for your service there too. Boxing room to boardroom doesn't happen without a little bit of education there in the middle. And I love your education journey as well. We're huge fans, as our audience knows, of America's technical and community colleges. And, at least for a long time, I think the often overlooked best option for so many students. And we're big advocates for, if you're finishing high school, go into the military if that's what you want to do, or go direct to the workforce, or pursue an associate's degree or a technical diploma. Four-year college is your thing. That's awesome too. Um, but you're a product of Milwaukee Area Technical College. In fact, recently delivered the commencement address at that institution. And as I mentioned to you already, I listened to that on YouTube. It was outstanding. Anthony Cruz, who's the president of that institution, is former guest on the podcast as well. He was on probably a year ago, maybe a little bit less. Terrific, terrific human being. So talk about your experience at a technical college, in this case, in the state of Wisconsin. Why did you choose that route? And then we'll get into a little bit the message of your commencement address as well.
Yeah, sure. So here I am, no longer gonna box. And I said, well, I got to do something with myself. What do? I got to go back to school. And so I'm 20 years old. I go back to school. At first, I said, I'm going to go to MATC and I'm going to get a 2-year degree in physical therapy.
Okay.
But when I got there, I had to take an entrance exam, and I scored embarrassingly low on the entrance exam. I had to take like basic arithmetic and study courses, and I told them, I said, look, this is too easy. I know I'm smarter than this, and they said, well, this is how you did with the exam, so this is where we need to start you. And so I started that way, and right away, that virtue of perseverance. Okay, now I gotta overcome, and I gotta fight, and eventually get into that physical therapy program. So I wasn't discouraged. I knew I was smart, and got all A's the first semester. And then
Okay.
I told the guidance counselor I want regular classes, and she said that can't do that. I
Huh.
got another layer or several layers before I can take regular classes. And I don't I just told her, I said, I'm gonna take regular classes and leave it up to me. If I fail, that's fine. But then that semester is when I really committed and gave my life to Christ.
Okay.
I started that semester, but then I gave up school, I gave up boxing, I gave up work, and all I wanted to do was get to know Jesus
Huh.
Christ.
As a full-time job. And then
Yes.
some.
Yep.
Amazing.
And so it was about a full semester, maybe 4 to 5 months of that. And then the next semester, then I came back and I took regular classes, and the rest is history. I ended up, my grade point was over a 3.5, and transferred everything to UW Milwaukee, where I got an occupational therapy degree. I have both a bachelor's and a master's degree there.
Well, you're certainly a student of a lot of things, and lifelong learning is important to you. And I know you, in fact, in that commencement address, you talked about the importance of being a lifelong learner. So tell me about the experience of going back to a school you attended, standing up. And if I'm correct, that might not have even been the first time that you did that before all the people in that audience, and kind of sharing your message. And what is that like
Yeah.
as a commencement speaker? And then one of the things that you talked about was, look, this isn't the end of your education journey. That's
Yep.
just getting started. So hit on both of those.
Yeah, so I've done several commencement speeches. I used to be on the Board of Regents for UW system.
Okay.
And through that experience, I gave lots of commencement speeches, but this one was different. So in preparation for this one, it was really hard for me. I couldn't get past a few sentences without really
Getting
crying.
emotional.
I
Yeah.
mean, I
Huh.
got very emotional. First, at least handful of times, it was very emotional.
Yeah.
And so and it was emotional because MATC is where I started.
Right.
MATC was where, for a while there, I didn't have much hope. I didn't know what direction I was going to take. So here I am. I was going to be an extremely successful boxer. I was very confident of that. And I gave that all away. And now I got to pivot and start something new. I felt behind. So all of those emotions just came back as I was doing my speech. And it was very personal.
Mm-hmm. And genuine. As somebody who, I wasn't there in person, but having watched it on YouTube or whatever platform it was on, very, very, from the heart. I mean,
Yeah.
you weren't just making that up to, to impress people or what have you. I mean, it was a really, really, direct and genuine speech.
Thank you so much. Yeah. So it was very special to come back to where I started. And I wanted to make sure that I encouraged the audience, and that's both students and parents,
For sure.
that education is really important. I've always believed in lifelong learning. I mean, if you go to my house, I have hundreds, if not thousands of books
Yep. Me
that
too.
I've
Yeah.
read over the years. And,
Right.
and many of them, when I first started out, I'd go to Barnes and Nobles and I read the book. I put a little crease. I'd come back and I wouldn't buy it because I didn't have the money.
Right.
I'd
Yeah.
get my coffee, and then I'd read the books at Barnes and Nobles. But I love reading. And I love professional development. I've been to Harvard several times for professional development opportunities, Marquette, UW Madison. I'm always doing something. And right now, I went back to school and I'm getting my executive MBA.
Yeah. That's awesome. At which institution?
It's at UW Milwaukee.
Yeah. Terrific. So how deep are you into that program?
So I'm almost done. So I started last fall and I'll be done this
Okay.
next fall.
Awesome.
So it's a 16-month program. It's been a grind, man. The statistics my first semester almost killed me.
Yeah.
And I wanted to give up, but man, I heard my coach in the background, "Don't give up, champ. Let's go, champ."
Right. Yeah.
So I can't give up, man. So I struggled through it, and I got a lot of help. There was one person in particular. She helped me a lot, and I helped her on leadership. And I remember talking to the professor. I said, "Look, this is kind of going over my head, first couple classes." And he kept saying, "Don't worry." And then the third time I said, "Look, man, I'm worrying. It's still, going over my head." He said, "Look, nobody in this class has the leadership experience that you do. You're going to help them with leadership, and somebody's going to help you with statistics. It'll all work out." And that's how it happened.
Right.
I'm striving for greatness and striving for champ and striving to be the best, so the little stress comes along with that
For sure.
sometimes.
Well, yeah, self-induced to some degree as well, but
Yeah.
that's okay. I mean, you set those expectations yourself, and it's a lot of that has a lot to do with creating greatness, whether it's in the in the boxing ring or in the boardroom. It's a great program, by the way, at UWM. I guest lectured to that program. It was just terrific, and the quiet. I think the topic was on marketing or digital marketing or something like that, and the quality of the questions I got from the audience was really solid. So really fantastic program. So congratulations on that.
Thank
I
you.
just plugged the book again, My Journey from Boxing to the Boardroom, and you talked about your five virtues and so on. Anything else that folks will find in that book, and we'll link that up in the show notes so they can find it. But anything else in that book that would be a key takeaway or two for our audience?
Yeah, besides those virtues, I think just, resilience and really encouraging, especially the younger generation, not to become victims. And so I have an A score of 6. A stands for adverse childhood experiences. And with an A score of 6 would indicate that I would have 1,200% likelihood of having depression or a 200% likelihood of committing suicide. And so, sure, there was incredible odds stacked up against me, but I fought to overcome those odds, and education was a key player in helping me overcome those odds. Certainly, boxing. Boxing was what really transformed my life and kept me on the right path. Showed me what dedication, determination, and discipline looks and feels like in order to become a champion. So I think those virtues and resilience and really, don't be a victim, man.
Right.
Just go out there and fight. And I don't care how hard it is in this great country, you have lots of opportunities to succeed and be very successful.
Awesome. That's an awesome message, especially sitting here as we record this just a couple short days after we celebrated the Independence Day and the 250 years that this great experiment, as they call it, have been going on. And there are so many opportunities. And it doesn't mean that folks don't have tremendous adversity. And it doesn't mean that we don't need to lift the floor for as many people as we can. We'll talk about that here momentarily. But that same opportunity is available to everyone. We don't all start in the same spot, but you'd like to think that opportunity for greatness is available to all Americans, and if not, that's certainly what we should pursue and aspire to. So you've used the term champ a bunch of times in this podcast, and you referenced that your coach called you champ, that you've called other people champ. You regularly call me champ. I know I'm not the only champ that gets called champ. What's the reason for that?
Yeah, I think two things. One, it's the virtues, it's your being and how you act that deserves to call you a champ. And so you are a person that's pursuing excellence. You are a person that's driven. You are a person that's caring. You are a servant leader. These are all great qualities. And so that's championship status right there. But the other part is aspirational. So you got to continue to be a champ. So when you're in the boxing ring and you're fighting to become the champion, you achieved it. But now next year or the next fight, somebody's trying to take you down.
Right.
So you can't get complacent. You have to work hard. You have to, everything that got you to be a champion, you have to do that and even more to maintain that championship status. And so it's a combination of who you are, but it's aspirational from the
Right.
perspective that you got to keep striving.
Yeah, and I wasn't fishing for compliments, by the way, because I know you call a lot of people champ, but I'll take them,
Yeah,
right? So thank you
yeah.
for those nice things that you said about me. But you're right. I mean, you're only as good as whatever your last game. You're only as good as your last 12 months, or I say in manufacturing, you're only as good as your last month, right? And then when I used to get a hard time from some of our team members in my manufacturing days, and even in some of our businesses now, where we'll celebrate a the best month ever or whatever, and we'll celebrate that in a meeting for 5 minutes, and then it's like, all right, now how are we going to do even better this month? And like, wait a minute, can't we just enjoy this one for a little while? So that aspirational side of it is that the more success you have, it's almost the irony, right? The more success you have, the more is expected of you, the harder you have to work because the tougher the competition gets, and that's just that's a little bit of what what life is like. But when somebody's wired like that, like you are, where you're always looking for your next opportunity, your next chance to influence somebody's life and so on, that's what makes the world turn. So love that attitude. So now let's talk about this. I mean, our audience is listening to you. You've got a fighting spirit. You have a tremendous message. Great education. Now working on your executive MBA. A boardroom can be a lot of different places, right? You can be in a big corporation. You've spent time in government, and now you're running one of the largest nonprofits in the Midwest in the form of Lutheran Social Services. So tell our audience about LSS and the work that you're doing.
Yeah, Lutheran Social Services, it's an incredible organization. We serve about 30,000 individuals on an annual basis. Individuals who face incredible odds, whether it be a child in crisis who has nowhere to turn, a family in turmoil that might be facing eviction, someone struggling with severe persistent mental illness or addiction, an elderly person or a person with a disability that needs just a little bit of help to live independently and successfully in the community, or a refugee that's fleeing from war and persecution. So LSS has been providing services to these kind of individuals for now 145 years. And with that 145 years, I talk about our value proposition really with three E's. One is our experience. There's not many organizations that could say they've been around that long. That means you've been through major world wars and depressions and recessions and pandemics, and yet you still stand. But it also means that we have become more sophisticated than most with our strategy and with IT platforms and the implementation of evidence-based approaches to make a difference in the lives of the people we serve. So that's really related to our experience. But we're also very effective. With 95% of the individuals served say that we have improved their quality of life. That's a tremendous gold standard in our industry, and 97% are satisfied with our services. These are individuals who face incredible odds,
Right.
who have significant challenges, and those are the kind of results we have. And then we're also very effective, and we're good stewards of the resources entrusted to us. With 88 cents on the dollar going directly into client care, where the industry average is 65 to 75 cents on the dollar. So very low overhead, very good stewards of the resources entrusted to us. So that's great for donors. That's great for our contracted partners, which are usually counties and state.
Absolutely. And I mean, I love the lives that you're touching. I love I'm glad you kind of talked about the 145 years that the organization has been around, the sophistication that you have the honor of serving on your board of directors, and just the level of sophistication and systems that you have in place in that organization is something that I'm around a lot of nonprofits, and you don't see that too many places. I know you know that, but it's important for me to underscore that with our audience, is that it's a super, super well run, super sophisticated organization. I'm going to tell a story, and then I'm going to invite you to tell a couple stories. But every once in a while, when you're working in this space, you get a reminder of why you do what you do. And so we had a board meeting in central Wisconsin about a year ago, and we went to a facility, and it was basically a youth facility, right? So everybody there, I believe, was under the age of 20, under the age of 18, somewhere in that range. Some of them very young, right? And in the board meeting, a number of these individuals, probably 15 or so, came in and sang just a beautiful song, right, about how important it is to care about others, and it was just really, really touching moment. And then we went on a tour of the facility, and I pulled one of your teammates aside, and I said, "So, just out of curiosity, what are these youth? Why are they here? And what did they do that they ended up in this? It was a youth corrections facility." And the answer was, well, a lot of them are some of these kids are like 7, 8, 9 years old. A lot of them are sex offenders. And I said, "You mean they're victims of sexual abuse?" And they said, no, they're sex offenders. And I was like, it was just this moment where it's like, what a cruel world do we live in. And they also said, look, almost every one of them was abused as a young person, and that's how they were conditioned to think that was, appropriate behavior or what have you. That was a moment where I was just like, oh my goodness. I mean, what a cruel world we live in that, this poor little 7, 8-year-old kid would be incarcerated for, for having done that. And not to say they shouldn't be there. Obviously, they need to be rehabilitated and served and so on. But the way that you do that is just absolutely impressive. That was a moment to me where I was like, wow, this is why we do the work that we're doing. I know you've got some great stories of individuals whose lives you've changed. So I would love to have you
Yeah.
share a few of them.
So same, right at Hami,
Yep,
Wittenberg, Wisconsin
exactly.
is
Yeah, I didn't know
where
how much I was supposed to say, but that's exactly
yeah.
where we were. Yep.
Yeah, so that's one place where I was really touched. When I first started at LSS, I went out there because Hami is where Wittenberg, Wisconsin is where LSS started 145 years ago.
Yep.
So I wanted to go out there, learn about the program out there, understand the history, and I was going to play baseball with the kids while I was out there. And so before I went out there, I started talking with my colleagues to learn a little bit more about the kids. And there was one of my colleagues who shared specifically about this one kid, how he experienced emotional abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, and it was really sad. And I started gravitating towards this kid. So we were playing baseball and we're, tossing gloves to each other in it when we're going in and off the diamond. And eventually he started reverently putting the glove in my hand, and I started doing the same thing with him. And when I was playing baseball, man, what I saw in that field, I saw teamwork, I saw respect. Not once did I hear a swear word. These boys were incredible. They were behaving. And so we finished the game, and then I start talking to the kids. I give them a little prep talk. First of all, I started sharing my story. I said I come from a broken family. I have an A score of 6, and I told them all the challenges. I grew up in poverty, and I said, if I could do it, you can do it. Do you believe you could do it? And then people were getting all riled up.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. And then I'm looking around, and I see the kid. At first he was excited, but then I kept on and said again, if you take these behaviors back into your community, you are going to be successful and you are going to do something great. And then I looked at the kid, and all of a sudden I saw him sunk in his chair. And I'm looking around, everybody's still excited, and he is just sunk in his chair. And I just imagine what was going through his head, and I just broke down crying right there in front of everybody. I imagine that this kid felt loved, he felt safe, and maybe he was imagining what it could be, what it was like back in his community, back in his home, and he was just very contemplative. So that's what went through my head. But I was so encouraged by our colleagues there and the love they have for these kids, the difference they make in their lives, and how they make sure that when they're transitioned back home, they're educated, they have a chance to succeed, and they're going to be transitioned back home safely.
Absolutely. That's amazing, amazing
Yeah.
story. And that did you ever find out what came of that young man, or
That was
interested
a long time
yeah.
ago, and one thing I know is he was transitioned back
Okay.
safely into the community. I don't know what he's done today. I
Sure.
wish I would have been able to keep contact.
Sure.
That probably was about 8 years ago.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully that day of inspiration for him is something that carried him
Yeah.
through his life. Again, I have no doubt that it did. So it's just amazing,
Yes.
amazing work. Any other thoughts or stories that come to mind?
One, and this was recently. I'll tell you that I went in Chippewa Falls. We're developing a residential treatment facility for drug addiction and co-occurring mental illness. And what happened out there is several hospital systems left. Their mental health services were gone. And so there's this facility called L.E. Phillips that was available, and LSS came and purchased it. And we had to raise 4.6 million to purchase it and renovate it. So we had this huge campaign out there.
And it treats It's a facility. What
drug
kind of work does?
addiction
Okay.
and co-occurring mental illness. And so we were out there fundraising for a couple years. And then we go out there, we had our board meeting, we had our grand opening, and we also met with several donors the day before to close out our campaign. And one of the donors was the CEO of Pezzi.
Okay.
And he gave me permission to share his story. Well, when we were there, I met him before the day before our board meeting
Yep.
and the day before the grand opening.
And Pezzi's a learning company of some sort, right?
Yeah,
Yep.
education
Yep.
and workshops, and they're global, all across the world. Very impressive. I wasn't aware of them, and right there in Chippewa Falls, and global and great CEO. And then we all start sharing our stories, and he shares his story. At the end, he said, I was served at L.E. Phillips, and I had addiction when I was growing up, and L.E. Phillips saved my life.
Wow.
And then right after that experience, I wanted to give back, and I started working for LSS, the Farming Center. And so I was really inspired by this. So here's this global guy, very successful
Right.
CEO, was addicted, served at L.E. Phillips, worked at LSS many years ago. And the next day I saw him in the audience, and I said, "Hey, can I share your experience?" And I said I could do it anonymously, or if you would allow me. And he said, "No, go ahead."
Wow.
So in the audience, I shared his story. And then after that, he came up to me and said, "Thank you so much. I'm so glad I came. Thank you for visiting me. And I'll get back to you about making a donation." And so the next day, he emails me and says, "I know you're $150,000 away from achieving your goal. I want to make that contribution."
Wow.
And so here's a guy, it was touching that he was impacted by L.E. Phillips, LSS specifically. Now he's a global CEO,
Right.
and he's given back to the organization that made a big difference in his life.
Just an amazing success story.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's I can't even put any kind of a top on that on that story that you just shared. We're gonna let that sit where it is because it's just absolutely incredible. Obviously $150,000, huge amount of money, and you've got a budget that you've got to hit every year, right? I mean, you're
Yep.
serving these folks, and you do get a fair amount of your model is set up to receive and put to work a fair amount of government funding, but it's not all 100% funded that way. So talk about your revenue model and how you support the organization, and then I know you're deep into your Love Big campaign, and would love to let you highlight that as well.
Yeah, we're about 85 million in revenue, and we provide.
So I'm going to interrupt you there quick and just share with our audience. You're running an $85 million organization, right?
Yes.
So, I mean, that's when we talk about one of the largest nonprofits in the Midwest. We talk to a lot of company CEOs in this show that don't have that kind of a revenue or that that kind of a budget or a financial structure. So I didn't mean to interrupt, but I just wanted to highlight that for a moment.
No problem. Thank you. Yeah, so we're providing all these incredible services, and our revenue model and approach is pretty diverse, which is good for us. So some of it is like a fee for service. So we provide the service, we get paid. Some of it's like a capitated rate. You serve X number of people, you get X amount of money that really covers costs. Some of them might have a slight margin. And then you have, that's pretty much some direct county they call cost-based reimbursement. So we negotiate the cost, the rates, and then they give us fully based on our cost with no margin. So we're pretty diverse from that perspective, which is good. But the challenge with government funding is, the rates.
Right.
Sometimes, you don't get a rate increase due to inflation. It depends on the economy and how things are going. And so that's where we try to supplement with fundraising to cover, I would call like the hospital systems called charity care, where they don't get reimbursed their full level and then they provide charity care. We don't really call it that, but that's essentially what we do.
Right.
When we're not reimbursed, to provide the services that we want to do with quality, then we have to supplement that with fundraising.
Sure. And that you're doing that through your Love Big campaign, right? And other
Yeah.
venues, but tell us about that.
Yep. Yeah, Love Big campaign is really a special campaign. It's a $12 million campaign, and there's three buckets. One is early intervention, prevention bucket. We want to get to these kids early. The science shows that the earlier you get to them, the earlier you're going to give them a chance to succeed in life. So we're talking even birth to 3, really young. And when it's birth to 3, it's not only them, it's the family. And so you're oftentimes a family, might have undiagnosed mental health issues, or they need support around the social determinants of health. And when you address that, it's going to positively impact that child. And so we are doing two things. One is school center mental health, using the school as a hub to get to these kids, and another program called family centered treatment. Family centered treatment is really getting to those kids that could go to the child welfare system or may have had an incident or an occurrence. They're not quite there yet, but we want to reach out to them and their families and prevent them from going there. Because once you get in there, then it's the deep end, and it's hard to get out. And so we want to get to these kids early. So that's one significant bucket. And then the other bucket is our facilities. We have a lot of outdated facilities that need significant improvement. We want to make them trauma-informed, welcoming, inviting, beautiful for the people we serve in those facilities because they deserve it, but also for our colleagues. And then the last bucket is endowment. And that's really about the long-term viability of the organization to ensure we have resources so that we can really be around for the next 145 years. And we've been successful thus far, raised almost 10 of the 12 million,
That's
about
amazing.
9.5.
Yeah.
And we're looking forward to raising the rest of it over these next year and a half.
And we'll make sure we link up for folks, and I'm sure many have been inspired by your story, inspired by the great work that LSS is doing. We'll make sure and link that up in the show notes as well if somebody is interested in participating at
Thank
a
you so
certain
much.
level. We'd be more than happy to do that. A few more questions for Hector Colón before we wrap up our time here on the Tech Ed Podcast. You and I were having a conversation not too long ago about your morning routine, which is really kind of unique and inspiring. So would love to have you share that with our audience. When you get out of bed in the morning, what does the first hour of the day look like for
Yep.
Hector?
So right away, it's prayer, and then meditation, and then a little spiritual reading, Bible, and then I work out, and then I go to daily mass. So that's how I start my day. I feel like I'm starting like a champion, right? I'm getting ready for the important day I have, for my colleagues, for the challenge of my job, for the people we serve. And I want to bring my best self. Just like when I was a boxer, I would wake up in the morning below 0 degrees. I'm out there running. I had my routine. I had my plan of life, and it was to be a champion. And now my plan of life is to be a champion for my spouse, a champion for my children, a champion for my colleagues, a champion for my organization. And it all starts with starting your day right.
Amazing. Yeah. So discipline spiritually, discipline in terms of that daily routine, discipline in terms of lifelong learning, which gives us an opportunity to talk on the lifelong learning side. You mentioned your education journey, some of the things that you're doing now. We all have maybe a little bit, one area of education that we look at a little bit differently than everybody else, or some opinion about education that might differ from the norm. Do you have one?
A couple things. One, that's a pretty broad question, but I would say that, the teachers, the professors are a huge blessing. And I wonder if we give them enough grace and credit for the difference they're making in the world.
For sure.
If you think about it, they're educating us, and leaders and professionals and therapists and nurses and doctors, and this is an incredible vocation. And I think we should be more appreciative of that. So that's first thing that came into mind. The second thing, being a former board of regent and the UW system, I see the need for major higher ed reform. I think the current system is unsustainable, and it needs to be significantly reimagined. in order for it to be successful. And what I mean is, we like in UW system, we have way too many campuses, way too much overhead, way too many programs that aren't getting kids to a financially viable career, and way too much debt. And so we have to really figure that out to make sure that we are more nimble, kind of like the technical college, where it's a little bit more nimble, really is more industry specific in terms of needs, and tries to tailor the curriculum, the education to address those needs. I think they have done a better job of that than the 4-year institutions. So we need to do more of that. We need to consolidate some campuses. We need to redirect resources to faculty and staff to make sure you have high quality people. You're not going to reach your full potential. You're not going to have an incredible university unless you have the colleagues that faculty and staff are going to bring that
Yeah,
forward.
it's like any organization, right? Unless you've got great people, you're not going to achieve greatness, and that's exactly right. And I think there are opportunities not just in the UW system, but in higher education in general. And you highlight the great things happening at our technical and community colleges, and there are plenty. Not that there isn't opportunities to reform there as well, but I agree on with everything you said. I mean, it's in fact we have conversations with leaders who are disrupting technical education and STEM education for exactly that reason, is that we do have a model that that needs to be shaken up a little bit, and students and communities will be the beneficiaries. And then how do you leverage that human capital that is already existing inside of our educational institutions and make them as powerful as they can be in changing lives? So, very, very well put by Hector Colón, and in many ways the reason we exist here at the Tech Ed Podcast is to certainly secure the American dream for the next generation, but be a part of reforming education in a way that's positive for all the stakeholders involved. One final question for you: if you could go back to that age of 15, maybe sophomore year in high school, and give yourself one piece of advice going back all that way, what would that be?
I'd say is don't give up. And that's what really inspired me through my coach. When I wanted to give up, after my first 2 losses, and here I didn't give up, and here I am. If I would have given up, who knows
Right.
where my life could have taken me? Could I have ended up addicted to drugs like my sister, or dead like my best friend due to drug overdose, or dead like my cousin due to the gang violence? All of that could have happened. So that virtue of perseverance and not giving up, but also, and this is really important for kids coming up, is being willing to fail. Don't be so afraid of failure,
Right.
because if you are, you're never going to reach your full potential.
One of my favorite sayings, it's an oldie but a goodie, is that successful people are just the ones that stood up one more time than they fell down, and that's just kind of how life is. So I think that's great advice. So your fifth virtue that you talked about, perseverance, and also the understanding that you don't need to be, or you shouldn't be afraid to fail. That's inspiring for a young person. It's inspiring for somebody of any age, I think, is the way that we should think about things. So plenty to think about coming out of this episode of the Tech Ed Podcast with my friend Hector Colón, President and CEO of Lutheran Social Services. So much to learn from you. It's the life lessons that were learned through just incredible experiences. And can't thank you enough, Hector, for coming on and sharing all that wisdom with our audience.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a blessing to be here with you today. And again, appreciate you so much for your friendship, for your service on our board, and for all you do for humanity.
Well, we are aligned 100% on that, and anything that I can do to support the great work you're doing, I'm all in and super supportive, and appreciate all the nice things that you said about us here on the Tech Ed Podcast as well. Hector Colón was our guest here on the Tech Ed Podcast. Wonderful, wonderful conversation. We talked about his book. We talked about his virtues. We talked about the Love Big campaign at LSS. We'll make sure and link all of that and more up in the show notes. We do have the best show notes in the business, so check them out. We will put those at techedpodcast.com/Hector. That is techedpodcast.com/HECTOR. When you're done there, check us out on social media. You can find us on LinkedIn. You can find us on YouTube. You can find us on Facebook. You can find us on Instagram. Wherever you go for social media, that is where you will find the Tech Ed Podcast. When you're there, reach out and say hello. As always, we love to hear from you, and we look forward to seeing you next week on the next episode of the Tech Ed Podcast. Until then, I am your host, Matt Kirkner. Thanks so much for joining us.